Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you played a shooter that you really enjoyed? It may not have been that long ago, but then I'll ask you again. When was this game released? I can see that you're thinking right now. Most likely, this game was released a long time ago. Although we can say that this genre has simply died, and that studios have focused on other games. Actually, no. Shooters are still released quite often. However, most of them are just bad at best. Maybe we have 1 or 2 good shooters a year, but compared to what this game used to look like, it's a shame. Just look at how many good, great, and truly legendary shooters were released back then, all in 1 year. For me personally, this genre is quite personal. These were the first games I played as a kid. I still remember Wolfenstein Return to Castle, which terrified me as a child. The first Far Cry, which seemed incredibly realistic at the time, and of course the first 2 Call of Duty games, which probably made me fall in love with video games. If it wasn't for these shooters, maybe I wouldn't be playing video games now. I wouldn't be making these videos, and I would have a good life. Fuck! I used to play Battlefield 2 as a kid saying, I can't wait for the future. The improvement of the game is going to be so insane. Holy fucking shit. But how is that shooters, once the most popular genre, which in fact had the greatest impact on the heyday of the gaming industry, have now degraded the most? It is the games that are most loved by the audience that receive the least attention from developers today. And I don't want to say that the gaming industry is getting worse in general. No. We have many examples where genres such as online games, co-op, and almost every popular genre are still holding the bar. And in each of them, we regularly get at least a few really strong releases a year. But for some reason, shooters are the most random releases today. In most cases, every new game is a disappointment. And for a long time, I couldn't understand why this particular genre has fallen so far behind the rest. I couldn't understand it until now. It was the mid-2010s, and the gaming market was exploding. New generation consoles were becoming more and more popular. Online gaming was becoming the mainstream, and DLC and digital distribution platforms were emerging. What was once just a product is turning into an entire ecosystem. Developers are beginning to realize now that nowadays a game is not just about selling it. It needs to be maintained. For a game to live, you need to return to it. And for a player to return, they need to be kept. And at this moment, we see how the very popular Call of Duty franchise has started to repeat itself very often. And this is very understandable. They are already releasing the 7th or 8th installment, but these self-repetitions are no longer happening in the franchise, but in the middle of even one game. The missions become trivial, boring, lacking something new, but still, shooters are still at a pretty good level. If in the early 2000s we received campaigns for different countries when we were thrown into different epic locations of the Second World War, then in the conditional world at war, this was no longer surprising to players. Anyway, this is a topic for a separate video, but I miss good shooters about the Second World War so much. When we played these first Medal of Honor or Call of Duty 2, and now you can see these dubious attempts to do something in this set from Activision and EA, you realize that modern game developers are detached not only from history, but also from reality. By the way, let's recall the Battlefield series, which became popular due to its unique map design, realistic physics, and the scale of the battle, also began its transformation in the same period, the first half of the decade. And yes, Bad Company 2 was also not bad, but it is already clear how developers have reached their peak in game design and the internal structure of their projects. Almost all shooter mechanics were perfected then. We got good stealth shooters, great realistic military simulators, and trashy action games like Bulletstorm. This was the peak, and as always happens, after the peak, there is an inevitable decline. It's not that players didn't care about it, but publishers realized that if this genre wasn't changing somehow, it would most likely stop being played, and even the biggest franchises could die. At this point, publishers started creating games not to impress, but to retain. Instead of remember, it was come back tomorrow. And this is where the shooter genre became the perfect candidate for a destroy and monetize project. Excuse me. This genre is simple in its basic mechanics, with a huge audience and the highest interaction rate. It doesn't require lengthy explanations or long tutorials, complex mechanics, or a deep plot that not everyone will understand. Every shot, every kill, every action of the player is a ready-made trigger for a small reward that can be instantly converted into a way to make money. It is this speed and simplicity that has made shooters the most convenient field for experimenting with seasonal battle passes, cosmetic items, temporary events, and endless reward cycles. Because the simpler the mechanics, the easier it is to add something bright and unnecessary to it. Something that doesn't change the game, but creates a habit. And shooters, like a depressed teenager without a father, began a period of great transformation. From about 2015 to 2020, shooters finally lost their face. But the worst thing is not even that they started to change. The scary thing is how quickly they agreed to abandon everything that made them a genre. And if we're talking about the fact that developers now needed to retain the player rather than surprise them, it is obvious that online shooters have become a priority for publishers. It all started with hybrids. Overwatch is a shooter where you have to shoot, but it's not the main thing. The focus there is not on controlling the situation. It's not on shooting, and not on decision making, but on flow. It's on constant action, on animations, on something happening all the time. Destiny went even further. Instead of the classic levels, there are hubs, strikes, and endless replays. What used to be a structured shooter has now dissolved into grind. After the first 10 hours, you're not interested in the game. You just do it because something new will come up. Not even better, just different. Then Valorant came along. Mechanically, it looked like Counter-Strike, and visually, it looked like shit. Apex and Warzone don't even feel like shooters anymore. It's just pure dopamine. One match and you don't even remember what just happened. The second one, and you already don't want to stop. Not because it's good, because it's always flashing, moving, and exploding. Your brain doesn't have time to process anything. It just rides the inertia. And considering it's an online shooter audience, well, let's just say the bar for cognitive processing wasn't that high to begin with. Simply put, Call of Duty has turned into cash on duty. But yes, I was just talking about multiplayer. Of course, it's easy enough to criticize something that objectively contains a bunch of shit in it. However, story-driven shooters, which were once the backbone of not only this genre, but the industry as a whole, have also degraded. And they degraded for a rather miserable reason. But before I go on, I want to tell you guys something important. If you want to see my future videos that YouTube will not censor, you can become my sponsor. I made only one membership level because I believe that everyone should be equal. India, you should learn this. The price of my sponsorship is just the same as if you were to follow someone on OnlyFans. And I guess this comparison doesn't really help me promote it, but anyway, it will help me a lot. Thank you. In fact, when I first researched this topic for this video, I initially wondered why story-based games have been so heavily downgraded and simplified. It's clear why online games should be focused on player retention, not on one-time enjoyment. But story-based games, in theory, should just give you a good experience and that's it, right? Maybe once. But nowadays, story-based shooters are no longer directly profitable. They can't be sold in parts, they can't be milked for years, they can't be broken down into seasons. You complete the game, and that's it. It's over. You're left with an impression, but no profit for the developers. And looking at this, publishers have found the only way to use story-based shooters properly. They simply turn them into a decorative addition to multiplayer, into a marketing wrapper, which is needed not as a new exciting experience, but as content that they will use for their trailer. Here's the hero of the center of an explosive chase. Here's an NPC saying something pretentious. Here are the rendered cutscenes. That is, everything that was relevant 10 years ago. Is there really no room for the genre to develop further? The paradox is that budgets have grown, technology has soared, the possibilities are endless, and ambitions have become less. If you look at the development of the genre in the 90s, it was explosive. From Doom 2 to Call of Duty 2, from Half-Life to Modern Warfare, everything changed in 5 years. Game design, pacing, storytelling, level structure, quality of production. Each game tried to surpass the previous one to do something that hasn't been done before. It was a period when the genre was constantly evolving, when you got a new game every year, but it was definitely superior to almost all of the previous ones. Nowadays, story-driven FPSs are no longer products of inspiration. They have been a costly part. They're not made because someone wants to say something. They're made because without that campaign button in the main menu, the whole game just feels incomplete, empty, and when creativity becomes a decoration, it dies. And of course, publishers don't need it. And even more so, players didn't need it either. In 2018, when Activision released Call of Duty Black Ops 4, without a traditional story mode, focusing exclusively on multiplayer, the developers explained that more players spent more time in online modes, and the campaigns became less relevant. Although, as for me, it was the Black Ops sub-series that had the strongest plots in the entire franchise. EA did the same thing. They realized that they had made the single-player campaign in Battlefield 5 so shitty and thought that only multiplayer in Battlefield 2042 would be enough for players. And sadly, this is really enough for the audience. So maybe the problem is with us. Maybe we've become so dumb, and there's simply no point in developers trying for us. We don't play games anymore. We just move by inertia. We don't think, plan, or study. We just react. A shot is a reaction. A sound is a reaction. A flash is a reaction. It's like when you're scrolling through your racist meme algorithms in Reels, and each new clip beats the last one just by being new. Your brain doesn't have time to process anything. This means that no experience is created. There is no "I remember" left. Only, I'll play a little more. And this is the ideal state for a developer, because if the player doesn't remember, they don't get tired. If they don't get tired, they don't ask questions. They don't notice that nothing changes from mission to mission, from year to year. Shooters are no longer built on innovation, new mechanics, and unique design, but rather on psychological loops that don't ask you to solve something, but ask you to keep going. This constant stimulation can lead to a state of hyperarousal, a fucking complicated word that basically means your brain is stuck in a state of constant overexcitement. This makes it difficult to concentrate, manage emotions and impulses, and can cause sleep problems. In addition, excessive use of this type of video game can change the activity in certain areas of the brain, similar to changes seen in other types of addiction, and there is even research on this topic. And maybe I sound a little bit like an angry parent who constantly forbids playing these stupid computer games, but it's just psychology. The dependence on fast dopamine hits in shooters is similar to the mechanisms used in social networks like TikTok. Each like or video view triggers a dopamine release, which creates a positive reinforcement cycle and can lead to addiction. Thus, players may feel the need to return to the game or platform looking for the next dose of pleasure. And it's a good thing that old school developers 2 decades ago didn't give a shit about all this player psychology and how to keep their audience for years. They created and wanted to surprise. And once upon a time, they created something that we still want to return to. And I'm already expecting a lot of comments from angry kids who are fanatical about the games popular now. But I really feel sorry for you, because we grew up with much better games. Fucking that's a wrap, boys.